Talk. Talk. Talk to me Tuesday. Welcome to Talk to Me Tuesday on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Mari B. I would like to welcome you guys today to today's show. It's very special for us today. We're actually starting a series, and the series is going to be sexual abuse. I have the pleasure of having on the show, and we will be speaking to attorney Rochelle Guiton. So welcome, Rochelle.
Hi, Mari. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I see you are adapting at the stay-at-home.
I am.
Yeah, so thank you. I want to thank you for being on the show and taking the time today. We're going to get to talk to you a lot about this serious matter. So we would like to open up those lines of communication for those of you guys that just want to know more, that want to help someone that you may know or tell your story. We definitely want to empower those that have lived through this, been through this, because with your story, you can empower others as well that have probably lived through the same type of story. Telling your story definitely shows courage, it shows strength. It is a very difficult task, especially with this type of topic, which is sexual abuse. So we're gonna go ahead and start out with attorney Rochelle Guiton. Tell us a little bit about your background in sexual abuse and how have you impacted survivors in this cruel world?
Absolutely. So I take a lot of pride in having previously worked for the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office in Montgomery County, Texas. And I think we've talked a little bit about my background, but I worked there for almost 10 years. I would say the work that I have been most proud of has been on sexual abuse cases, cases of child exploitation, human trafficking, sexual abuse of both adults and children. I've worked at the Children's Advocacy Center, Children's Safe Harbor, where I worked on cases for children, sexual abuse for children ages under 10. I also worked as the chief of the Child Exploitation Division, where I worked with internet crimes against children, which involved offenses of sexual performance of a child pornography, online solicitation of a child, human trafficking as well. And so the bulk of my work, I would say probably the last 5 or 6 years there, I had focused on sexual abuse of children and adults and have been quite passionate about it. And that's kind of how I crossed over here at D. Miller and Associates to work on similar cases here.
Wow, that's awesome. So that's many, many years of you working with the sexual abuse, human trafficking, sex crimes. There's just a lot, and I'm very excited to have you on this series. So with this series, we hope that we can educate and answer any questions that any of you guys that are watching may have throughout this show. This episode, we will specifically focus on what is human trafficking and what is sexual abuse. So we're really going to uncover that with attorney Rochelle Guiton today in regards to what does that look like? What is that? What does that even mean? I know a lot of us look at either TV or kind of hear the word, and we have our own assumption of what it can mean. But attorney Rochelle, let's start with you letting us know what is sexual abuse.
Sure. So when I speak, I like to let my survivor talk to me about what sexual abuse means to them. When they say that they were sexually abused, some people say sexually assaulted, some people say rape, but it depends on what happened to them. And so I'm very careful. When someone says that has happened, I let them exactly tell me what that is. But by definition, when you say that someone is sexually abused, it could mean several things. It could mean that someone attempted to sexually assault them without their consent. They tried and were not able to complete the act. It could just include fondling or unwanted sexual touching. The what I would say are the most volatile cases are when it includes some sort of penetration, whether that was by force or if it's a child. Children cannot consent. So, for example, in Texas, there are different levels of sexual assault. There's indecency by contact, where it could include touching of the genitalia on top of the clothing or under the clothing. There is sexual assault of a child. There is aggravated sexual assault of a child. It varies based on the age of the child involved. And so it depends on exactly what is done. But I would say one of the things that we ask when we're speaking to survivors is whether or not there was penetration. And then remember, when we're talking to survivors, they may not use the correct medical or legal term that we might use in court. And so I like to scale down to their terms and ask them to describe for me in their words what has happened. And so, that basically is what sexual abuse looks like to me. But it could be in lots of different forms. It could be a stranger, someone that you don't know that approaches and forces a sexual abuse. It could be someone in the home that you trust that does this. It could be a domestic violence type situation in which, it could be a spousal relationship and they're dealing with the, manipulation, control, power of a spouse that does not listen when they say no, and that they don't want that to happen. So, there's lots of different types of sexual abuse, and the survivor gets to tell me what that means to them.
Well, I want to thank you for that very elaborate answer, and it's very important that you get that elaborate for our viewers that are watching right now, because there are so many scenarios. Every story is different. Probably a month from now or 6 months from now, that answer may change a little bit if you speak to a different survivor. So I definitely love that you're giving a little bit of examples of what is considered sexual abuse. Now, I do want to warn for our viewers right now, if you do have small kids, I do want to kind of warn you guys of the potential topic that we are talking as far as a little bit of the content that we have here. I just kind of want to warn you guys, if you want to remove your kids from the room or have parental guidance, that would be good. Some of this conversation could help children as well, but some of the content may be a little bit words that they may not be used to. And so right now, Rochelle, we're talking about sexual abuse, and you gave great examples. One question I have for you, is it physical only, or could this also be verbal?
So I wouldn't necessarily include verbal abuse as a form of sexual assault, but I do think that it could be inclusive. So you could be sexually assaulted and someone could verbally abuse you.
Got it.
But in order for us to be able to meet, what I would say are standard definitions of sexual abuse across the country, there has to have been some form of, touching without consent if it's an adult. It had to have been without consent. Some form of touching or attempted touching or fondling of some kind in a sexual way. So of the sexual in a sexual context.
So you just said without consent, and I kind of want to touch a little bit about that. There is the consent that is very obvious of saying either yes or no. But what if it's a consent that nothing's being said, or it's a child that can't communicate that, or maybe there's a language barrier and nothing was necessarily said? How do you, as an attorney, or in cases that you've done, handle that type of non-consent?
Right. So for children, children cannot consent to sex. So and it'll vary all across the country, but I would say for the most part, 17 and under, you can't consent to having sex. Now there are some laws that are in place that protect if you're within a certain age range. For example, if teenagers make the decision and being within the age of consent, that I think is okay, and it will vary from state to state. But in general, a child cannot consent. So even if, for an example, you have an adult that has approached a child or touched a child or sexually abused them in some way, and that child did not say no, or if that child, say it was a 14-year-old and said yes, but this is an adult, someone well within their 20s, it would not be legal and would be considered sexual abuse.
I see. And what if, I know we're talking about children, and sexual abuse can really happen in all walks of life, okay? It could happen from every age, even if it's in a nursing home. I know we've heard certain cases like that. What if someone is over the age of 18, and let's just say a little bit older, over 20, and the consent wasn't a strong yes or no, but nothing was said just for the fear, or maybe they were in a situation that they couldn't, or how would you handle it if someone was of age?
Right. So, it absolutely depends on the dynamics and facts of that particular case. Sexual abuse is one of those things, especially when it involves a situation of having to determine whether or not consent was given, that you have to determine it on an individual case basis. I think that it would be important to speak with that survivor to talk about what they felt, if they said no, and if they did not, why, what pressures were they under, whether or not they felt they were forced, if they were under some sort of duress. I certainly would want to be able to talk to them about the particulars of that exact situation. So that's kind of a hard question for me to ask. I definitely would want to get all the facts surrounding that particular case in order to determine whether the law says that that person who would have attempted to sexually abuse or did sexually abuse that particular victim reasonably understood that consent was or was not given.
Okay.
So it would definitely be on a case-by-case basis. And then I'm just going to throw this out here. We haven't gotten to this point yet, but I very much try to let my survivors know from the very beginning that I believe them. There are unfortunate circumstances in sexual abuse cases where it may be difficult to prove all of the aspects of the case that we may be able to prove legally. But that never means that I don't believe them or that I believe it didn't happen. And so I think that's always important when they are telling their story of what happened, that they know that people believe them, and that belief is not necessarily dictated by the proof that's required by the law.
Yes, I have to agree with you, Attorney Rochelle, because I love that approach that you make that very clear with your survivors, because some people that build the courage to come out and tell their story think that the person they're telling the story to will not believe that they weren't at fault, that they weren't provoking, or whatever the situation is. And so I love that you open up your heart and also your mind to kind of listen to the story and believing them. And sometimes you're right, there is no facts to kind of prove that the story that was said is true just because there's not supporting facts. So I love that you do that, and I want to encourage, if anyone is watching, to kind of have that peace of mind as well, at least with Attorney Rochelle Guiton. Now, right now, we're going to kind of switch it to a different topic, which is kind of still kind of similar to sexual abuse. But before we do so, we're going to be talking about human trafficking. I want you guys that are watching to take a look at this video before we turn it over. In 2018, the United States ranked as one of the worst countries in the world for human trafficking. Houston, New York, and Los Angeles were ranked as the top cities with the most human trafficking activity. What is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the business of stealing someone's freedom for profit. Our survivors have been tricked, drugged, assaulted, and manipulated into providing sex or working in awful conditions. D. Miller & Associates, PLLC, is committed to helping survivors who have been exploited by human trafficking. If you or a loved one have been exploited for sex trafficking or human trafficking, please contact us for more information on how we can help. Awesome. So that way you guys got to see a little bit about what we're going to introduce now, which is another serious matter that's very prominent in our world, in our society today, which is human trafficking. So Attorney Rochelle, I want to ask you that same question, which is, what is human trafficking, and is it a form of sexual abuse?
Absolutely. So, human trafficking can be a form of sexual abuse. There are different areas of human trafficking, and it kind of has a very broad definition, at least in my opinion. It is basically when an individual uses force, fraud, or coercion to control another person for the purposes of engaging in either commercial sex or soliciting some type of labor or service. So yes, commercial sex, I think that is probably primarily what most people are aware of. So for example, when people or individuals are forced into some sort of prostitution or working in a brothel or massage parlor, something of that nature, would be what people are typically aware of on the sexual abuse aspect of human trafficking. And then what we may not hear about as often, but does happen as well, are also labor and services as well under force, fraud, or coercion. Now, when you have an adult involved, you have to have force, fraud, or coercion. So that adult had to have felt that they were forced to do those types of things. And then, of course, if they're under the age of 18, we would not have to prove that they were forced or frauded or coerced into doing those particular acts.
Wow. Okay. That's also another very detailed answer. There's going to be a lot of scenarios I know that we're going to kind of mention and uncover right now. Diving a little bit deeper into human trafficking, I kind of want to uncover about the abuser, okay? And I know we kind of talked about two things, and I want Attorney Rochelle Guiton I want you to touch on both things, on the sexual abuse as well as the human trafficking side. But what does an abuser look like?
Madi, that's a great question. I think that years ago, we thought that abusers had a certain look, that they looked a certain way, that we could kind of pick them out from a crowd. You could tell your kids to, hide from a certain make of persons. Today, I just don't believe that that's to be true anymore. Your abusers can look like us. They can look like anyone. They don't have a certain cultural background or ethnicity or even employment backgrounds for that matter. We are seeing more and more that they're able to blend in to society, and survivors are having a hard time, more so now, being able to be believed because their perpetrators don't look like bad guys. Some of them are women. They may not have necessarily that threatening appeal that you think you would typically see on cases like this. So
Wow.
I think that's a great question. They blend in. What you'll see and hear a lot of on human trafficking cases. I have been a very big proponent of being careful and monitoring what our children do on the internet when they start using avenues like Facebook and Instagram, and monitoring who they're talking to. They get in Messenger and private messages and direct messages, and they are speaking to people that have a photo up, and they're not the person that that child believes it to be. And so they build relationships with you, they groom you, and I think that we all have to be mindful that anyone could be a perpetrator, and it's as simple as giving access to our kids. If we're talking about children, of course, adults the same. We could also equally be groomed just like a child. We could equally build relationships with people that we don't really know and begin to trust people that we don't really know and shouldn't trust. And so I think that's one of those dynamics that our platforms, our social media platforms, have created this ease of communication, but it has kind of had us put down our guard for who we allow access to us, to our kids, because it ultimately is who we give access to.
Yeah, I definitely kind of hear all that detail. And we do have a couple of comments live. We're going to get to that here in a second. I think it's very important that I probe and follow through with this next question I have for you on the abuser can look any given way. It could be in your home, it could be a spouse, it could be a boyfriend, a girlfriend. It sounds like it could be all types of walks of life. And my question to you, and you may not know the correct answer, but just based on your experience, why would someone want to be an abuser? Is it because it's something they went through in life, like an experience? Like, what makes someone maliciously do this to a person?
Yeah, so Marty, unfortunately, I have asked myself that several times over the years, having heard some of the most horrible cases, and been able to talk with and know the survivors that have been in those situations. I've asked myself that several times. I don't think that there's one answer to that. I have had perpetrators that have had bad experiences in their past. They've been abused in their past. I have had some who I was not able to find evidence in which they were abused in the past. It breaks my heart to, have to say this out loud, and that it might be true about our society and humanity, but I don't know that there is an excuse for it, right? Or a rhyme or reason to it, in that just people do bad things, and it is awful to have to know that a human being would violate anyone in that way. Even if we're outside of the sexual abuse realm and we talk about domestic violence, unfortunately, people are hurt by people they believe to have loved them. And so I think that's why we're doing this today, is to talk about it, put it on a platform before everyone. We're not hiding in the darkness with this. So that's why I think this is such a great idea, Madi, that you had to do this here on this platform. is this is humanity. This is what people unfortunately are dealing with every day. Um, I'm even fearful in this epidemic that we're dealing with COVID-19. People are locked away in their homes, and children are not able to go to school. Spouses are not able to go to work, and they are unfortunately, and I think I could foresee this as a very real situation, locked in their homes with their perpetrators, without anyone to see those signs and symptoms that we would typically see. People are under a lot of stress, a lot of depression right now, and it would not surprise me that abuse, whether it's physical or sexual, would be on the rise right now. That this is just a very unfortunate truth about the world that we live in.
Yes,
So
I think.
I don't have a good answer for that, but I certainly think that this is a great platform to open people's eyes and start taking action, even if it's nothing but educating themselves about those dynamics.
Yeah, and you know what? Another great thing is asking a lot of questions. That's how you're able to uncover certain things, or if you have any type of doubt, is just ask away.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you never know. Sometimes we.
Ask questions, inquire of your friends, of your family, teachers that are out there doing virtual classes, trying to do video chats, and being able to see these little kiddos and their parents and making sure that they're okay. For some people, I imagine school being one of the safest places for them.
Yeah, and that you bring up a great point right now. We have that stay at home, and sometimes we want to think our stay at home and our home is our safe place, but for
Right.
some and for many, it may not be a safe place. So I kind of ask you, and based on the abusers that you have seen, and you have seen many on the prosecutor side, could this be an action of power for them?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely see sexual abuse and human trafficking as a form, in a lot of cases, as a form of domestic violence. You see the same cycle of abuse, the same manipulation, power, and control issues that you see in domestic violence, especially in human trafficking cases. Um, you know, I absolutely, you are correct in that.
Yeah, I kind of want to bring that up. So just in case any of you guys are watching, and even if it is an abuser right now watching, just want to uncover some of those things that we are now being very transparent in this subject. Attorney Rochelle, I do have a couple of comments. I have Ashley right now saying, "Hi Rochelle, one of finest." And then I do have Buys. I hope I'm saying that right. She's saying, "What is the statute of limitation on reporting sexual abuse?" I think that's a great question. And if you can explain to our viewers exactly what the statute of limitation means for those that may not know legal terms, and then letting us know your expertise on that answer.
Sure. So the statute of limitation is basically our guideline for filing cases. So just in very simple terms, for example, in Texas, if you were to get in a car accident, you would have 2 years to file your case in court against the person that caused the accident in order to recover any damages, to make a financial recovery. And so if you miss that deadline, then that would be it. That would be the bar for being able to file suit. And if you could, Madi, I think you mentioned the question asked was about recordings of sexual assault.
Correct. It says statute of limitation on reporting sexual abuse.
Okay, so I would, before I answer, would definitely want to know more, but to give that person some guidelines, I can do that fairly easily, without necessarily giving them any legal advice. But on a from a criminal standpoint, when you say report, that's the word that kind of keys in to me as far as the means of how you're going to do that. If you say report, I'm thinking to law enforcement. From a criminal standpoint, it would depend on the age of the victim and when it happened. Texas, I think, has been very forward moving in its extensions of statute of limitations for especially child abuse cases. If it happened after a certain point, it may be that you will not have a statute of limitations and that you could have forever to file. However, on a civil case, it very much depends on when it happened, how old that person was when it happened, and then also where. So I don't want to give specifics on that because it very much depends on those details. But I do think that our country, and I hope that most people are seeing this, especially with the Me Too movement, that governments all across and legislators across our country are making very good movement to support survivors and understanding the dynamics of sexual abuse by knowing that, there's all this pressure and all of these reasons that we all consider and understand why we have delayed reporting. And so I think it's great, the movement that we're having across the country regarding that. And it's showing in the laws that are being created for statute of limitations. So I certainly would push and implore that person asking that question to reach out for more information, but provided that we have more details.
And look, I think that's a great question because sometimes the survivor may not get the courage to report right when it happens. And, maybe there's guilt or maybe there is a sense of what happened. Is it me? They start going through their mind and playing out the scenario all over again. So I think that is an important question, especially for the abusee, on when to actually report and or come to the light and potentially speaking to someone like yourself.
Absolutely. And I think, Madi, there are, I think, lots of different emotions that come with having to share and report that something like this has happened. There is guilt. What could I have done differently? There is shame. How could I ever reveal to anyone that my father, my brother, my uncle, did these things to me? I think that there are, it's a very dynamic type of case. I certainly would always push that people that have gone through that go through some counseling. And I always suggest trauma-based, trauma-informed counseling. But it's a flood of information, a flood of things that kind of go through your mind, what they're experiencing. And I know this because I've talked to so many. But what I always want to say, and I think this is absolutely the platform to say that this is that you are not alone. Mm-hmm. The time to report is always, when you're ready, of course. But right now, I think that the community around us is beginning to understand with us the dynamics of this type of case. And so, I have the utmost respect for someone who ever has the courage to come out and say what has happened.
Yes, I definitely agree with you in regards to that. It takes courage and it takes strength to just speaking to someone openly, and even speaking to someone that's maybe not someone you're close with, and that you might not even know, kind of like yourself. I do want to switch it over now, Attorney Rochelle, to now the abuse okay? Someone that has been abused sexually. And I know this is going to be a very general question, and I want to ask it for those viewers that are watching that either may have or are thinking something in their mind. but who is most susceptible to being sexually abused?
So again, Monty, you have some tough questions, but these are great. They're great questions. So the very general answer that I could give is that anyone is could be susceptible to any form of abuse. Survivors don't have a certain look about them or background. I think that that could be anyone. That would be my general answer. I do, however, think that we do have a vulnerable class of people that we should pay attention to make sure or ensure that we're not seeing those kind of red flags and signs and symptoms of abuse. So, for example, some of those children, for example, would be children that are juvenile, in and out of juvenile custody, runaways, children that are, kind of more susceptible to want to leave the home and be susceptible to someone who is willing to groom them and show them a little bit of love. And, and then that kind of opens the door, right? Once that child who may have already in the past been abused or neglected, already have, unfortunately experienced some form of sexual abuse. I think that that would be a more vulnerable class of people. So I do think that we should pay attention to those, kinds of things when we're communicating with kiddos in general, with children, with adults, looking for those signs.
Yeah,
People that, kids that are, for example, you may have a perfectly well-behaved child, never been in the juvenile system, never ran away from home, but they have a lot of laptop time. They have a lot of Facebook or Instagram time. And every time mom or dad walks in the room, they close down the laptop, or, they turn over the cell phone and they're hiding what they're doing online. I certainly would suggest to mom and dad that they monitor those things more closely, because there's a reason those kids don't want you to see those things. It definitely puts mom and dad in a hard position. I've been in that position. I have a teenager that I have to make sure that they are looking and doing appropriate things online. And it's one of those hard jobs as a parent, but it is, think that we are motivated to make sure that our kids are not providing access to perpetrators and to people who they shouldn't be trusting.
right. And look, I really want to ask this question too. Is there a specific reason that would make it okay to be sexually abused?
No, absolutely not. There's not a single reason that I could ever think of that would make it okay. The way that a woman looks or the way that a woman dresses, even if the answer is yes until the very last second and you change your mind, and you say no, there is no excuse. Believe that, at the heart of this, it's a moral standpoint that we all have to take about what's right. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And when we're ready to stand up for survivors and share with them the fight of, that their bodies are their bodies, and no means no.
Yeah, and look, I love that you brought that up as far as image on how they dress. I know I've heard and I've seen a lot of documentaries in regards to this topic on how maybe they are dressed provocative, and that might be the reason why society will blame, and there's not necessarily pointing the finger on a certain person, it's just society will blame that image and location of the victim will be a certain way. But is this a reason for the abusee to blame themselves?
No, absolutely. And you know that unfortunately they are doing that, which is where that guilt and shame comes in, but absolutely not. I would say that would be, just absolutely no excuses on that. No excuses.
Yeah, and now I kind of want to talk a little bit about who we might be touching currently right now. We just kind of mentioned society will hear someone's story and maybe be quick to judge the reasons why this happened without knowing the true story or all the facts and all that good stuff. So, what do you suggest to someone that is listening right now? What do you suggest that they do if they're listening to someone outpour their story to them?
I mean, listen to them. Let them know that they're not alone. And just being support. Sometimes them just being able to outpour what's happened, have somebody listen, intently listen, and be intentional with your support and inquire of them what they need. Ask them what would be helpful to them, and being able to give them that control back, give them some of that decision making power back of what they'd like to see happen. But I certainly would implore people to let anyone that comes to them with their story of what has happened, that they always listen and always let them know that they are not alone. I can't say that enough, is that just knowing that somebody is there for them would probably mean the world.
Right, and being in this world that we're in, Attorney Rochelle, we see it, and that's where you can strongly speak based upon experience, especially the years that you have in experience on the prosecuting side. There's many, many, and many of these cases that you've dealt with on the forefront. I want to ask you, what do you suggest to someone that is trying to get help?
Oh, so I think that this is another thing I think that has come not just out of the Me Too movement, but just partially out of that, and just being able to, simply go on Google. It sounds very cliche and maybe even unprofessional, but I think that there are so many resources out there. One of them that I think is a very great resource and platform is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Is one, and I think that they have a mountain of resources. They also provide statistics. They take calls. So I think that is huge, and being able to do that. And then also for sexual abuse, going to rain.org. You can also report there and receive resources. And then they branch you out to different resources in areas that are near you. So these are national organizations that provide a bank of resources to survivors.
And look, I love that you're kind of touching base on this. There's a lot of hotlines. There's a lot of people out there that are willing to lend a hand. We will load this information on the comment section, and it also will be at the end of the show. But if this is something for your local authorities, we strongly suggest on reaching out for that help if it is urgent, emergency, anything like that, that you need assistance right now and you just need to get out for whatever reason. I'm going to switch it a little bit, Rochelle, on talking a little bit more and uncovering human trafficking. I want you to tell us, from somebody that is very much involved from the child sector as well as the adult sector, how serious is this topic?
You mean human trafficking? How serious is it?
Correct, human trafficking.
Oh, I don't think it gets any more serious than this. I think that the numbers are constantly increasing. I think that we have avenues. I've mentioned a couple times today in the show that social media creates a platform where we give access to ourselves, our kids, very easily to perpetrators. So the days of perpetrators having to, follow you into Walmart or follow you into a McDonald's and abduct your child are gone. They don't have to steal our kids because they have access through social media. They can talk to our kids through instant messaging without us even knowing it. So I think it's especially important, it's extremely important that parents educate themselves and monitor their kids. And it definitely creates a vulnerability in our homes when they're able to communicate with people that they don't know, that we shouldn't trust, and basically allow them into our homes, welcome them into our homes, and not really know who these people are. And then they start that process of grooming and manipulation and control. So, yeah, I absolutely think it's important.
Yeah, and look, I want to really bring awareness to those that are watching right now that may be parents, that may be aunts, that may even be cousins. What you just kind of said, human trafficking can be present anywhere, airports, McDonald's, even if your child is walking home from school. Just being a little bit more protective. I know we've kind of gone, especially with a lot of things being on social media, being a little bit more lax on certain things, but this is probably the time more so than ever to be a little bit more stricter. There's applications out there on your phone, on your devices that are masks. It's crazy. A little bit about that, and I kind of want you, Attorney Rochelle Guiton, to tell our viewers what are the roles that are involved in human trafficking. A lot of people don't know kind of that chain of roles and what everyone plays a part in. So you could either say the legal or just the general terms of the roles that are involved in human trafficking.
Right. Well, it kind of depends on the organization. I think that there could be a very small organization that is running kind of a human trafficking business. It could be one that considers themselves a pimp. That would be the trafficker, and the person that is in control of one or more girls that they force into, or men that they force into prostitution. And so then the pimp would be the trafficker, and the prostitutes or the women that were forced into prostitution would be trafficked. Then when you get into, I guess, more, I would say, intricate criminal enterprises that want more individuals to be trafficked, then they would recruit others to help them recruit people to be on their within their organization. So you may have a hierarchy of traffickers. If sometimes when there are several women involved, for example, you may have a pimp who controls all of them, but he may use a woman that he's had it with control over for several years, someone that he's built a relationship with, somebody that he has bonded with over a long period of time, and then that person will exercise the same power and control over his victims. And so it varies based on the organization. I've seen it in different scenarios, but unfortunately, it can be kind of like huge criminal enterprises, similar to the way that people would deal with drugs. And unfortunately, you can make more money as a trafficker of persons because you don't have to build your supply of people. You use the same people over and over again, and so you don't have to try to find a new commodity to sell. And so unfortunately, it is, and it can be a criminal enterprise. But it varies in size. It varies in what the make of that looks like.
Wow, that detail that you've provided is pretty clear, especially for our viewers to kind of know how the structure is made up of on the human trafficking side, and how much detail you just provided for us. How can you recognize if someone is trafficking someone, or if they are being trafficked if you're out in the public?
Right. So I think that some of these signs and symptoms are things that are going to be difficult to see if we're not really paying attention or looking for it. But some of the things that I would caution people to look for, especially police officers, for example, when they're doing traffic stops, if they notice that, for example, and this is just for an example, not any particular case type, but if there is a male and a female in a car or several females in the car, they don't appear to be in the same family or age group, something like that might give a red flag. If you start looking at and they get an opportunity to talk to them and they're unable to give first and last names, if you're ever around a female and they don't make eye contact when they're communicating with you while they are with their trafficker or pimp, being able to look at you and hold a conversation and make decisions about questions that you're asking. If they, unfortunately, one of the realities of this is if they opened their purse and you start seeing that they have a lot of condoms and things like that in their purse of unusual, variety, I think that would be a sign that someone is in a situation that would require that, to be in their purse on a daily basis. But just being able to look if they have hotel keys and any number of the carded hotel keys, things like that you wouldn't typically expect someone to have and carry around in their purse on a daily basis or their wallet.
Those are good and great tips that you're providing our viewers right now, just to kind of be on the alert side. If you're seeing it or recognizing it, that is around our society. I have a great question right now. This is from Artist. Artist is saying, how common is this in Houston?
So that's a good question. I think that it is especially common in Houston. The National Human Trafficking Hotline, that website should have the most current statistics, but I do believe that it is extremely prevalent in the Houston area. In fact, it's one of the I would say probably most well-known hubs for human trafficking in the country, along with New York and Los Angeles. And unfortunately, we are seeing this a lot. We're also seeing not just forms of trafficking and prostitution, but also trafficking and having women and men go into strip clubs and things like that, and brothels and massage parlors. And so it's not just, one background, one particular ethnic background, several different types of backgrounds. And I believe that the governor has put in place several different types of avenues and things that we're building throughout the state of Texas in order to start curtailing this, and task force and things like that that are being put in place. I don't know that I know the most current numbers, but the numbers in Texas are extremely high.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice for anyone that's watching right now to get the actual count as of right now. Those numbers do change daily, if not monthly. I know human trafficking can happen anywhere, even down the street. So I think it's very important to recognize if it's someone that you're kind of seeing, to help and report, even massage parlors or cantinas and stuff like that. If any of these things are things you've seen, I recommend reporting it so that the proper authorities can make their investigation and start putting an end to this. Attorney Rochelle, I do want you to kind of uncover a little bit, what does a pimp look like? And when I say a pimp, you just kind of went over that. A trafficker, what do they look like? Could it be someone even in your family?
Oh, absolutely it could. One of the most dynamic stories that I heard was from a survivor who shared her story at a conference that I went to. And she talked about having been trafficked by a family member, and it was always during the time of the rodeo. It was one of the saddest stories that I had heard. We all look forward to the rodeo. It's a good time. It's fun. It's tradition here. But and this is nothing, absolutely nothing against the rodeo at all. I think it's great. I love going, but it just kind of goes to show you that even in the most family oriented environments and gatherings, that something like this could be going on in the darkness. It's not going to always be visible to us, and so there is no look of a trafficker. Traffickers, they can be what you see as a typical criminal, but they could also be businessmen. They could also be family members and people that you would never align. I think, even in my experience, it has been more common in not just human trafficking cases, but sexual abuse cases, child exploitation cases across the board has been more common that I would see a perpetrator being someone that on the surface did not appear to be a perpetrator. And it makes it very difficult for people on the outside to believe the survivor because, hey, I know this person. I trust this person. He's never done this to me. How could I ever believe he would ever do this horrible, horrible thing to you? And so it just goes to show us that there is no look and there is no, particular make or model of what that is.
That makes it very surreal and almost makes it scary that it could be a normal look, and it could even feel like a family member, which that just totally breaks my heart. I kind of now want to uncover, Attorney Rochelle, what does the person who's being trafficked look like?
Same thing. They don't have a look or a make. There's no model of what a survivor would look like. They come from all walks of life. It never surprises me when I have a client or a survivor as a prosecutor, that they come from all walks of life. They could look like you and I do. They could have the appearance of having it all together and it not affecting their life at all. And then some people who have an emotional response. They're angry, they're sad, whatever those responses are. And they're entitled to feel however they feel. They, in fact, are, I think that's what we owe them, to allow them to feel the way that they feel about their situation. But certainly, I think it's just a fact-based, individual case basis of what that would look like.
Yeah, and I say over and over again, it could be all kinds of walks of life, and I mean that. It could be any age, any race, any sex. This can happen on both sides when we're talking about the trafficker or someone being trafficked. It could look like any single person, and there is no way to uncover it, but the way to uncover are certain actions, kind of like you mentioned. Now, for someone that is watching, or that someone that knows about something and is wanting to help someone, is it easy to escape as if someone were being trapped or taken? Is it easy for them to leave the situation?
No, I would say that's one of the hardest things to do. Certainly would, and this is a hard topic for me, because if I don't know your situation, I can't give any real hard advice on how to do that, how to escape, except that I would say I implore you to reach out to the people around you and trust that there is someone out there that will listen to you and believe you. Any opportunity that you have to call the hotlines that we're sharing on the show, to please do that. There are lots, I mean, so many local organizations out there here, especially in Houston and across the country, that are waiting for your call. I have not ever seen in my years of being an attorney so much passion in people in general and teamwork that partakes when we work on cases like this. It's always a huge effort. And so just somebody, if there is anybody that is watching the show right now, you're alone in your room and you're thinking about, leading or reporting, there are so many people in the world that are ready to help you. So many.
Yes.
And I hope that just that alone will give them comfort in knowing that there are people out there, including myself and Madi and D. Miller and Associates and other organizations out there that care about what happens to you. You are not alone, and we hear you and are ready to help. So, if it's not me, let it be someone else. Madi, I just thank you for that opportunity to be able to say that. Not ever, to tell someone how to get out, but just a simple call, even to 911 in the most dire situations, that there is someone on that line who's ready to listen. So,
yes, absolutely. You know what? We're going to put on the comment section right now what we're going to put at the end of the show as well, which is those hotlines that you're kind of speaking about on how to seek for help. We also put on the screen our phone number. You're more than welcome to give us a call. Those hotlines are meant for shelter, for escaping, for a lot of those needs that they are able to provide, and they have those resources. So we will put it on the comment section here in 1 second. I kind of want to talk about the states and the cities. We did do a little research. It's not with any type of data as of right now, but some of the top cities that we've researched has been Houston, Texas, New York City, Los Angeles, California, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Illinois, I think even Florida. It's happening everywhere. I just want to definitely be clear on that. There are some that are a little bit more magnified on the data of how many people are being trafficked. So I kind of want to bring that to the forefront on how many cities and states are having trafficking. Now, Attorney Rochelle, I want to ask you, is there a way to stop this in our society? What can we, whether it's myself, viewers, or anyone involved in the situation, can we start by doing?
Absolutely. I think, so, I know at least in what I have been doing with the district attorney's office and being involved in the task force, there's the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance here in Houston. That is such a widespread effort among several different law enforcement organizations, and then several other task forces all across the country where, government agencies are creating opportunities to network all of these forces together to work operations and cases so that they can be, more informed about what's going on across the country, because these criminals are networking as well. And so, unfortunately, we've got to be able to keep up with the pace of that and be able to network with them and what network, just like as if they do. And so I think that, I do think that our state has equipped us to be able to do that. I think that involvement in your local agencies, and, even if it's just as little as, reaching into your pocket and making donations to organizations that help human trafficking, that shelter them, that help them find other resources, provide counseling, things like that. It could be just as simple as that. I do think that one of the big parts of stopping human trafficking is curtailing demand. If we stop the demand and the buying of sex, then the traffickers won't have a reason to sell. And so being able to push that effort and just, even, if we just think about it in the aspect of being in our own homes and being in our own communities and educating people on the importance of self-love and respect for self and others. There's just, a heavy, moral standpoint with all of this that you are buying people. You're buying people for sex. And just education. I just can't say that enough. Would be huge. To start off with that, let that be the front line, is just educating people on, this is just wrong, even just from the moral standpoint. But getting involved, getting engaged with your local organizations, most definitely, I think it would also be, kind of a part in buying into the fight against human trafficking.
And look, you brought up a lot of great points, and I know one of the points that you mentioned is also stopping the supply and the demand. That not necessarily, I know you mentioned kind of buying sex. A lot of people may be hearing that right now. It might not be something that you can touch. Some of it can also be stemming from pornography. A lot of that is buying platforms as well. If you know of anyone, stopping that as well, which some of the trafficking could be stemming on the pornography as well. So just that could be how, if you are watching, how you can also contribute on stopping this, or if you are watching and you want to support, you can also go to any of those organizations that Attorney Rochelle just kind of mentioned. Now, what I want to bring up to you guys, April is such an important month for us. So April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I will ask all of you guys that are watching right now, or that are watching this video, to support all of the survivors, or even people that are out there that haven't came out with their stories and haven't gotten the courage. I want you guys to support these survivors in the world. Attorney Rochelle and I are wearing teal for a reason. The color for Sexual Assault Awareness Month is this teal color that you see on the screen. I'm wearing a ribbon, and you guys may not have that color. So what we're going to do as a team, we are going to be putting up a picture here in a second in the comment section. That picture is going to be exactly what you guys are going to see in the screen here in 1 second. And so I ask that we all support, whether it's wearing teal, putting this picture that is going the bottom of Rochelle's screen and the bottom of mine on your social media, any social media platform, and really support this movement. And this support, what it's doing, it's empowering those survivors to have that courage and to have that strength. As a group and as a team, we could empower those that have suffered. So I want us all kind of to come together and definitely support each other, but especially those survivors out there. So Attorney Rochelle, I want to ask you, if there's a family member or friend who is going through this, what would be some words of encouragement you could give them to get and to seek help, and especially justice?
Absolutely, Marty. I just, again, would just implore them to really consider the changes that are coming across the country, and the fact that people already are making themselves more aware and knowing that they are not alone. They are not alone. That there are other survivors that have stood where they stood and, had to muscle up all that courage in order to report, in order to leave, whatever the circumstances were in their life that they had to do in order to, come out of that and to muster up the strength to do it. And they can do it too. You can do it too. You are not alone. And that there are people like Madi and I that are ready to help you. So just, take that step, make that call, just pick up the phone and make that one call.
Yes, I love that suggestion and those words of encouragement that you're giving anyone who's watching right now that may be involved in the process or that may recognize any of these type of stories. Sexual abuse and human trafficking are very serious matters in our society. So if you need some type of help or assistance, please call the hotlines. We did put them on the screen right now. They are also on the comment section. So please call these hotlines. You can also give us a call if you want to speak directly to Attorney Rochelle Guiton, which that number is 713-850-8600. Attorney Rochelle Guiton, I want to thank you so much for coming on our show. A serious series that we're doing right now of sexual abuse and human trafficking and sharing your legal knowledge.
Oh, thank you for having me, Madi. This is great. I am excited about the next coming shows and just, being able to not only share information and educate, but just to have an open platform for discussion of this. So I think this is great. Thank you for having me on the show and excited in the next few weeks of what we've got planned.
Yes, it's definitely such a pleasure. So what you guys are seeing on the screen now, which you will also see at the end of the show, is be sure to tune into the series. We do it once a month. Don't miss any of these episodes. It's a total of 5 episodes in the series. And how everything might progress, we'll probably do a series 2 as well on educating the community on sexual abuse and introducing change to our society. That's exactly what we want to do for you guys, anyone who is watching now that can make a change and be part of that movement. So I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in and for sharing your special show, this special show with us. The more we spread the knowledge, the more likely we are to help someone that is in need. So I do encourage that you guys share it, spread the word as much as you can, and make sure you tune in to any of our episodes in this series. Until next time.
Human trafficking is a worldwide epidemic. Awareness, accountability, and action will be crucial to saving our communities. The wrath of human trafficking crosses gender lines, ethnicities, and all age groups. Traffickers and abusers want you to feel as though you are alone, hopeless, worthless, but you are fighters. You are strong. You are survivors. You are worth everything. You are not alone. Let us give you a voice. A simple phone call will get you the help that you deserve, the help that you need. We will ensure that we are with you every step of the way. The team of attorneys at D. Miller & Associates, PLLC, is ready to fight for you, to change your life, to change the community, and to change the world. Let us be your voice. Give us a call at 713-850-8600.